There we go. All right. Welcome, everyone, to Funding Student Success Strategies for School Counseling, Student Support, and Post Secondary Readiness Leaders. So, Paul, if you go to the next slide, we'll introduce ourselves briefly. My name is Dr. Danielle Duarte. I am the proud president of Hatching Results. And what we are all about, for those of you who don't know about it, is transformational change for counseling, school counseling programs, systems, and practices all around using data. And we also work with student support service programs and post-secondary readiness to help positively impact students. So those of you who have known us for a long time, we primarily had previously supported just school counseling programs. We've broadened that because as we're thinking through all the student supports and post-secondary readiness that students need, they all align. And so we provide comprehensive professional development to help support in all those different areas of college and career, academic, and social and emotional. And so we have two amazing team members here that are going to support you all throughout this webinar. Paul's a retired superintendent. Amanda and Paul have both worked at the state level. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
All right. So I'm Paul Meyers. I'm Vice President of Business Services here with Hatching Results, and formerly was a district superintendent and an educator in California for 38 years. So I've been a teacher, a counselor, an administrator, a district leader, worked at CDE at the California Department of Education in charge of school counseling. So I've been familiar with funding for the last 25 years of my professional career. So I'm hoping to share some insights with those of you here today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Miller. I'm currently the Director of Partner Services here at Hatching Results. And similar background to Paul, I started as a teacher. I became a site school counselor. From there, I moved to the district office. And prior to coming to Hatching Results, I had the pleasure of supporting school counselors in the state of Arizona at the Arizona Department of Education. This is a topic that I feel near and dear because I feel like this is something that as teachers and counselors we're not taught about. So I kind of thought I need to learn this stuff and I need to learn how I can fund, what are my funding sources and how can I support those that I serve. Happy to be here today.
All right. So our objective today is to hopefully identify some national CTE funding streams and ways in which you can use that to support school counseling programs and positions, professional development, et cetera. We also look at whole team approaches to funding, as well as California specific. So the way we've organized today is the first half will be federal funding that should apply nationally to districts across the country. And then the second half will be focused just on California. And we'll go over the May revise, which is the revision to the governor's initial budget proposal in January, as well as other funding opportunities in the state of California. So if you're coming from another state, you're welcome to stay hang in there if you want to hear what California is doing. But I'll let you know when I'm done with the first half of the webinar today. And so what we have is hundreds of people. Actually, there was over 200 when we checked just before we started of people who registered for this webinar. So it's great to see such a positive response. As of earlier this morning, it was 180 people from 33 states. So it's great to see so many people. And if you'd like to just introduce yourself in the chat, that way you can make connections with other colleagues in this profession. Based on the rules as you registered, I would say half of the folks that are here are either counselors, school counselors, or somehow related to the school counseling role. But there's a whole lot of other people here, as well as administrators. We have some graduate students. We have executive directors, lots of coordinators. And so my expectation is that your experience with funding is minimal. And so I'll try to be concise, but also clear with as we go through the funding streams. And just know that you will get a copy of this presentation following our webinar, as well as the resources that are embedded in today's presentation are free and available for you to use as resources. So it will, I think also there'll be a recording. So if you want to just listen to it again, because I know that for me, it took a long time to wrap my head around how funding works in schools. And I'm going to go pretty fast. It's going to be like a fire hose of information. So it's okay to come back and revisit when you just want to know about a particular funding stream and just want to review the information. Okay, so we're going to start with federal funding. And I would say that there was a big I don't know. We all held our breath, I think, in January as there was two different proposals going on in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, and there was talk from the Trump administration of cutting funding for schools, federal funding, severely. But luckily, on February 3rd, the Congress did pass a bipartisan and bicameral fiscal year, basically budget for the year that covered labor, health, and human resources and education. The labor is where the Perkins and CTE funds live, and in the education funding is where your Title I's, Title II's, Title IV's live. And bicameral meant that leaders of both houses negotiated and agreed on it. So this was really somewhat unprecedented, is that the Congress pushed back on the Trump administration and decided to fully fund the federal funds that go to schools for the 26-27 year. And while most of the funding was flat or level funding, schools can expect the same amount of funding with some small increases that are listed there in your Title I. Your IDEA is special ed funding. The REAP is your rural education funding, and impact aid is for low-income schools. So there's just small increases. When you're thinking about $1 million increase, when you have tens of thousands of school districts across the country, they aren't big numbers. The billion-dollar numbers are big numbers, but the $1 million numbers get spread so thin that it's pretty inconsequential. So this was what it could have looked like, and you can see that the highlighted areas where there was discrepancy. Title II to Title III. Title II is professional development. Title III has to do with English learners. Those were going to be gutted by the House proposal. Senate wanted to keep them as is, and that was actually what won the vote. They basically went with the Senate proposal. So, and in doing so, rejected 99% of what the president's original proposal was. So, uh, schools took a big sigh of relief and said, okay, at least we are good for another year. Now, we're in the process of, negotiating next year's budget or the year after that. And again, we'll see how that lands. But one of the things that was nice about this provision was you might have remembered earlier last year, some of the funding was held up in the Department of Education. And there was some consternation between the Congress and the presidency about whether or not he has the authority to do that. So they made sure that this bill was very prescriptive and that the funds have to be distributed to states by July 1st. That's what they agreed on. And so each state gets their own sort of allocation based upon their population. And the idea was that they set very clear spending rules so that the administration couldn't change things after the fact. And it also limited the administration to making sure if they're going to switch any funding from the Department of Education to the Department of Labor, as he was trying to collapse the Department of Education, that the Congress needed to be updated and there had to be interagency agreements. So this kind of gave us a bit of a reprieve, saying that some of the monies that were held up were eventually paid, and now we have a budget for 26-27 that should be at or a little bit more than what we had the previous year. So this was the highlights. There was $79 billion that is discretionary, and about 217, which is about 217 more than the year prior. Most of your K-12 programs like Title I and IDA had modest increases. And then We'll talk about the Pell Grants. There was the words were kept the same, but there was some changes to the Pell Grant, and I'll share that in a little bit. And then there was some guardrails put in. At the end of this presentation, I'll tell you where we currently stand with those guardrails because much of the funds have not yet been distributed to states. So one of the things that's always curious is if you're new to federal funding, you'll hear the words ESEA or ESSA being basically shared as though they're the same thing. And so I just wanted to just kind of go over that. The ESEA stands for the Secondary Education Act, and it was the original back in 1965. And then as different administrations come in, they call them different things. You might remember the Bush administration had the No Child Left Behind, which was still ESEA. It just they renamed it. So it was their version during their administration. So the current version that exists is the ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act. And so when you're in a conversation and you're curious about which one do I use, the vehicle for which people are funded or schools are funded is the ESEA, but the version of it is the ESSA. Maybe a little bit of minutia, but I think it's always good to have some clarity. I think when you have a little bit of more knowledge, it gives you a little more confidence if you ever need to speak up in a meeting and ask about funding. You can have some confidence knowing that you're using the right terminology. So federal funding, Title I, is in the Every Student Succeeds Act, really is for the purpose of improving the needs of students and meeting their educational needs. So it's educational strategies to close the achievement gap. Schools can use Title I for a variety of reasons. And I know, at least in California, that Title I's funds are often distributed to school sites, and the school site councils get an opportunity to have some say as to how those funds are used for the students in those schools. So if you've ever wondered what a school site council was for, or if you'd like to know more about school budgeting, the school site council is a great place to go because you actually get to see these budgets, these dollars, how much is allocated to the school, and how this district is wanting to use those, and the voice that you get to have if you want to change it. So sometimes it goes for staffing, sometimes it goes for after-school programs, sometimes it's for aides in the classroom. But anytime there's federal money being given to schools, there are a lot of rules attached to federal money. And if you've ever had a federal program review, you know that they expect a lot of data. So just as I guess anytime anybody that wants to use these funds to say hire a school counselor, you have to make sure that you know whether you're a school-wide or a targeted Title I school. A school-wide means your whole school gets to benefit from the Title I status of your school, and a targeted means only a small population of identified students get to benefit. And so it does matter whether you are targeted or whole school. So when you get this slide deck, you see where the little chickie is clicking. There's more examples here, and I've given I got a document there that you can access that'll give you examples of how Title I can be used to support students using student support services folks, whether it be counselors, psychologists, social workers, etc. Because there's a lot of things that are prohibiting kids from learning, and monies in Title I can be used to help students learn. So those are some access points. At the very bottom of the page, you'll see this little thing called CASA. It's CalSACS. It's California SACS, and SACS stands for the Standardized Accounting Code Structure. Every single school in California has the same resource code for 3010 for Title I. And every district in California, if you ask, go to your business department and ask to see a budget report for resource 3010, you will find out how much money your district gets, where it's going, how it's allocated, and how much has been spent. This is an important code for advocating for programs, wanting to know whether or not there's money in there to do maybe a special project you're thinking of. Every state has a different one. I would say most states maybe not all, but most states, the majority of states have a standardized code system. And you can usually access it on your state website. And once you know those codes, then you have a little bit more power going into a meeting, so that you can ask specifically for, well, how much is remaining in resource 3010, because I have this idea that I want to start. So this is one of the ways that I give this. So you'll see that on the bottom, and that's for our California folks. But if you're in a different state, you will have to research that on your own. So Title I and Title II are two different ones. Title I is basically interventions for students. And Title II is training for educators. So if you're looking to get trained on new things, whether it be AI or some new resource, that training can come from Title II, but the actual services to students, the actual working with kids, is Title I. So that'll give you a little bit of an example of those two titles, and so you have an understanding of so the basic three that we're gonna talk Title I, Title II, and Title IV. And so I'm gonna let Amanda come in and talk about Title II.
Great. Thanks, Paul. I think the one thing for me as a site school counselor, and then as I moved into a district lead position, was starting to educate myself on the different types of buckets of money and how they could be used. And then having conversations, whether depending on how your district is structured, with who controls those. So at certain districts, it was a director of federal programs. For other districts I worked in, it was an executive director. Sometimes I would email my superintendent directly and be like, "Hi, Dennis, is there any money left over in Title II that I can use to go somewhere?" And so just kind of just if you don't know, like ask questions. For me, so for Title II, it's any of our professional development. That is what can be used to send you to conferences, to send you to trainings, to send you to one-day regional workshops in your area, but anything that is going to help you to improve your practices as you are working with students. I always say ask. The worst I can get told is no, right? And so I always ask for money for everything, and not just for myself, but for others as well. And so anything that we do within school counseling can be covered under Title II for that professional development. I also know that like around the springtime, money has to be spent. We never want to send money back to the state or back to the feds. We want every penny spent. So sometimes we, get fatigue at the end of the year. And so I think reaching out to those that run certain programs, like, again, is there any money left over for this? I'd like to send my team to this, or we have questions about that. Going on, I think I have slide control. Do I? Yes. Okay. Oops. Okay. So again, oops. Are we on 16? Okay. Yeah. So again, just knowing that anything that you are providing for your students, for school counselors, can be covered under Title II. When I was at Phoenix Union, we would have a set dollar amount that was agreed upon every year with our director of federal programs, and that's how I would send people to our state school counseling conference. And so we would work out those numbers every year to determine what was my budget for the next year, so I would know how many students to spend. One thing, and that Paul mentioned earlier too, that I really learned is before I worked at the State Department, I started to learn the State Department's website, because all of this information and all of this money and the amounts is public knowledge. And so you can go on and see how much your district received in these funds, right? And then I would go in and I would just start asking questions. So I realized we received X amount of dollars for Title II. Can you tell me how that money is being spent? Right? Or you should be able to find that on your district websites as well. This came into play too as Title IV was introduced. And Title IV is kind of newer money, I would say, in the last 10, 15, like maybe 15 years that Title IV came out, or that I was aware of it. And a lot of what we do as school counselors or other student support services can be funded through Title IV. And so just know it has these three categories: safe and healthy schools, well-rounded educational opportunities, and effective use of technology. So I would say, depending on the hierarchy and your position, start that conversation if you're a site school counselor with your administrator. Like, how are we currently using Title IV funds at our school? And they may or may not know, because sometimes districts will make those decisions and then things maybe aren't brought down to the site. So if they don't have an answer, you may just like, well, who can I talk to about that? I'd love to learn more. And that's kind of the approach that I took. And so I really, when I worked at the Arizona Department of Education, wanted to educate our counselors in Arizona about Title IV and about Title IV-A specifically, that we're going to talk about next. I was really
So,
proud of the work. Go ahead, Paul.
well, I just want to say those of you that have been in education prior to 2015, Title IV used to be the anti-drug funding. So we used to call it Title IV because to remind us that it was a drug funding. So
Mm,
it's basically your substance abuse prevention programs were all funded out of Title IV. In 2015, when it was changed to the ESSA, they they basically switched it up so that safe and healthy schools was a part of it, but they also wanted college and career in there, as well as use of technology. So that's when it expanded.
thanks. I did not have that historical background, so thanks,
Some of
Paul.
us are older than you.
I know I'm not that young, but I'm not that old. Okay, so as we get into Title IV-A, for some reason, Danielle, I've lost slide control, or Paul, can you click it over?
Oh, um, I've lost control of it. Do you have it? Oh, there it
Oh,
is.
there it goes. Okay.
Okay.
Um, so just know there are rules behind how you can use Title IV aid. And again, as Paul mentioned earlier, there are a lot of rules that come tied to federal money. So it's just learning what those rules are and making sure that you understand them. I cannot stress enough, like just ask questions of the people who are in control of the delineation or the money and how the money is spent so that you can just have those relationships with them. One thing that I really love that was created for Arizona, and it's this link here, the Arizona SHS funding guide, is it is on the safe and healthy schools portion of that Title IV. It talks about the funding streams, and we kind of categorize like school counseling. Here's what Title I can pay for. Here's what Title II can pay for. Here's what Title IV-A can pay for. And we also had ESSER buckets at the time. But what I love about this document is you can see if ESSER funds were paying for that, which are no longer available, what other funds can we tap into to cover maybe what ESSER was covering? So if we wanted to continue sources. Um, Learn your Department of Ed's website. I think that understanding that and knowing where to find that information is extremely crucial. And our job as state employees is to provide technical assistance and answer your questions. So I loved it when I was at the state and people would call me and say, hey, I need more information about this, or this seems a little unclear for me. Can you help me understand this a little bit more? Please don't be afraid to reach out. Even if they don't have a school counseling coordinator, they have title coordinators or title directors that can answer questions for you. As we move on into our other different types of funding, CTE is a big one that I think as counselors we forget about, right? And so Perkins 5 was reauthorized a little while ago now, and there were some additional changes for that. But CTE provides a lot of funding, not only to support just the CTE programs in general, but post-secondary planning and post-secondary success for our students. And so there's lots of buckets of money within CTE as well. And again, very specific ways of how this funding has to be spent. And so I know sometimes a lot of the conversations I would have as I was working out of the CTE department at the state and then also at one of the districts is, well, why can't other teachers have this money? Because it's very specific delineated for CTE and those purposes. I want to go down to the um, next slide. So just remembering that it can cover salaries, but you have to be focusing specifically on CTE, right? So there are a lot of grants specifically in California that have come out for CTE counselors. So it's just figuring out the best way to incorporate that into your departments. But I know we especially in Arizona, we didn't have separate counseling models like that at the sites I worked at, but we definitely supported CTE, and then they supported us through professional development as well. So were we attending state CTE conferences, our national CTE conferences? As school counselors, are we educated on the role of CTE and how we need to be scheduling students to ensure that we are also maximizing the funding streams that come back through program concentrators, program completers, and our placement surveys that we take after students leave CTE. And so these are just different ways that they can be used. I think the biggest one as I think about school counseling is career development. And how do we support career development? It is one of our 3 domains, and your CTE departments can be your allies with that as you are trying to build your knowledge of career development and how you can support your students. One thing that is crucial with Perkins 5 is that you can bring that money down into the 5th grade. Okay. And so
If your state allows it.
yes. Okay. If your state plan, yes, allows it. And so this sometimes can be tricky. I know in Arizona, we have K through 12 districts, we have K-8 districts, we have high school districts. So depending on too, the makeup of your district is as when I worked at a high school district, I could not just give money to my K-8 district to say, oh, run this event. But we could run an event where we were inviting our partner districts to learn about our career pathways, to learn about our CTE pathways, to learn about the benefits of CTE. And so kind of getting creative of, I can't give you this money, but I can host events that can bring our partners in. And so it's really important to know what your state has around the rules and laws behind that. Your CTE director should be one of your best friends, I think, as a school counselor. I always, we partnered so well with our CTE staff at all the districts I worked at. And because we all have the common goal, school counselors and CTE, we want to see our students with successful post-secondary plans when they leave us. And so making sure that you're partnering with CTE in that way. And I'm going to turn it back over to Paul.
All right. So there are other college access and success funding that the federal government provides. Pell Grants are financial aid for low-income students, and I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. But let me just go over. These are the TRIO program, the Gear Up program. Some of you already know about these programs. They're funded at the same levels as previously. So the Gear Up grants are still going on. If you're interested in getting those are 6-year grants to provide basically funding for 7th graders through 12th grade on making sure that they have post-secondary success. So these are all programs to investigate, and the funding has remained the same. So that's good. One of the things that changed was this new the Pell Grant called the Workforce Pell Grant. Remember, these are funds that are coming out of the Department of Labor, and the administration has wanted to increase skills for students to be able to do things of plumbing, auto repair, construction. And so they're finally allowing the Pell Grant to be used for what they call short-term, high-quality programs that last from 8 to 15 weeks that often allow someone to come in as an apprentice to a specific field. So this is new, and if you're working with high school seniors, this became effective this year for the class of 2026. There is more information by clicking on that link in the middle there. The purple, anything that's in purple is a link, and the things that are just emphasized are in green. But this is just, there are some rules to it, and it's good to get educated on it, but it is a new opportunity for students to get some financial aid to enter a technical profession.
Paul, I wanted to add in too, if there are sometimes there are grants that are coming out of the Department of Labor that have to go through State Department. So if you see something that you're like, I want this grant to be available in my state, check in with your State Department and say, as a state, are we applying for this? Because this is money we could use at our site. So don't be afraid to reach out if you see something that has to be done through the State Department or the governor's office to elevate your voice as a school district that you want your state to put in for that money.
Right. The Federal Department of Education distributes the funds and then deals with accountability things, but the actual programs are run out of the states. So one of the things that's important to know about funding counselors with CTE funds is that you can use career counselors that are specifically, that's their job title, that's what they're doing. They're working with all students in career education. But if you're going to use an academic counselor, then you have to prorate them a little bit so that they're not so that you can judge when they can be funded by federal funds and when they're funded by state funds. So academic counselors can only be funded if they're doing very focused academic requirements regarding CTE, such as A through G grants, requirements that would be college admission requirements, or other dual enrollment or community college coordination. Those tasks would be fundable through a federal college and career type funding grant like Perkins or one of the other ones. But you can't just fund a counselor, a general school counselor with these federal dollars because they're restricted for a particular purpose. So that's just there as an advisory. And then these are additional links. Hatching Results has created a college and career funding guide. It's currently available on our Hatching Results blog page. If you haven't seen our blogs, we have quite a lot there that we put one out a couple of every month on just current topics. The other thing I thought would be useful is there's links here to grant terms and grant essentials. It's important when you're looking at federal grants to know whether they're competitive, whether it's formula driven or an incentive grant. Formula ones are the easiest because they just come to you based upon your ADA. Competitive ones means you have to fight for it. You have to get a really good application in, and you have to have a real designated need. And the incentive ones are usually to start a program, but not to sustain it. So it's important to know those terms. And then the cheat sheet at the bottom for grant essentials is really all the things that can trigger an audit finding. And if you're in charge of a program that has federal funding, review this so that you can have your ducks in a row in the event that you have a federal program monitoring FPM come into your district and want to see your records, because they do require you keep records, which is why a lot of districts, especially large ones, will have somebody in charge of federal programs to make sure that all the criteria are met that the government requires. Youth Build is another program that the applications closed back in March, but it's particularly for occupational skills in construction, housing, but they've integrated AI literacy into it. And so it is worth checking out. The Department of Labor just announced that cycle. I don't know what the next cycle will be. It says here at the bottom that they've introduced funding. The Congress has April 16th, but we don't know whether or not it will be funded yet. So that is something, if you're interested, you can look at these two links at the bottom to monitor that. And then here's I guess the sad part is while monies are supposed to be delivered to states by July 1, the White House Office of Management and Budget has currently withheld over $2 billion that should be going to schools right now. And so they have to be appropriated by this office in order to be sent to the schools. But as of May 1st, which was when I got this information from Education Week, they've released little or no funding to these competitive grant programs. So people have applied, received the programs, but aren't receiving the money because it's being held up. So that's just a little hiccup within the current administration. And so hopefully that will be resolved in the near future. That concludes the federal portion of this webinar. We're just slightly over half an hour mark because now we want to switch over to California funding. And so those of you who came in from a different state, feel free to check out. We will be sending a follow-up email with links and a recording.
Yeah.
That you can
I'm going to interrupt you for a quick
Yeah.
second, Paul. Yes, but first I wanted to let you know I just put a link in for a free 15-minute consult because we know this is a lot of information, and thank goodness for Paul and Amanda because they did an amazing job putting this content together. And I extra thanks to Paul, he created all these different documents that are in here, all the blogs. So if you are interested in connecting to talk about ways funding can look and how we might be able to support you in this, I put the link in the chat for the sign up for 15-minute consults. Completely complimentary.
And for those of you that are taking off, these are very text-heavy slides, and that is intentional because there is so much information. So we want you to have this slide deck as a resource to come back to because we know this is an overwhelming amount of information. So, and just go back and just start asking questions. Like that's the best way I think to learn.
And the slides are already up on the website I just put in there. There's a few paragraphs, then scroll down and you can click and the slides are right there for you. So got it for you.
Yeah, hatchingresults.com. I think you can go right to the blogs from there, and you can start. So those of you that are checking out, feel free to get to that resource. For those of you staying on, let's get started with California. So the California budget process works with the governor beginning in January, putting out his governor's proposal. And then after the May 15th tax deadline, they revise that proposal based upon whether or not revenue in the state exceeded or came in above or below what they estimated. So back in January, they're estimating how much they're going to have in revenue by June. And by May, they have a pretty good idea of the revenue, so they revise it. And the good news is that revision is great for us. So there's an additional $6.4 billion coming to schools. And so if you look at it, if you take 6.4 billion and divide it by 5.7 million students in California, that's over $1,000 per pupil. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come in that way. It's being allocated, and I'm going to share with you how it's being allocated. But extra money is always a good thing, especially if your district's experiencing declining enrollment or having other fiscal challenges. So the May revise is a record $127 billion that supports community schools and K-12 schools. So community colleges are part of the Prop 98 because they provide many of the technical skills for students, and a lot of the dual enrollment courses and such are set up that way. But the per pupil funding has gone up to a $21,000 or 28 if you combine all the federal and local resources. At $28,000 per student, that's $155 every day of student attendance. This is why districts have to pay attention to student attendance. This is how schools generate revenue. It's not on your enrollment number. It's based on butts in the seats, is what they say. The number of students that attend each day is how schools get funded. The COLA is our cost of living adjustment, and it was set earlier back at 2.3% back in January. It's now been boosted to 4.3%, and those funds go straight to the local control funding formula, or your LCAP. You might, and these are discretionary. Districts get to choose how to use those monies, and so that's a nice increase of more money than was expected. And MTSS is something that school counselors are very much familiar with. There's funding within the Community Schools Initiative for $50 million for the Orange County and Butte County offices to continue promoting and coordinating this MTSS for schools. And I think that's a positive thing. Another piece that I really like is the student support and professional development discretionary block grant. The key word is the sixth one, the discretionary term. This means districts can use it however they want. And so last year there was a discretionary block grant of 1.7 billion. This year it's 5 billion. So that's $500 per ADA per student that was attended at your school. So this is a lot of money, and it can be used over the next 3 years any way your district chooses it. So it could be used to backfill for declining enrollment, but it could also be used to start new programs or add more support. The key words are student support and professional development. So when your school district says we don't have any funding for professional development, point them to this discretionary block grant. They get a choice on how to use it. And so I would say that would be one of your best advocacy tools right there. Community schools is another one that's getting $1 billion extra because the state sees this as the vehicle to blend together or braid together your after-school programs, your CYBHI, the mental health reimbursement fee schedule, and MTSS framework. So this is a good thing to lean into if you're unfamiliar with community schools. There's a link there that you can learn more about it, but I think that the schools that have community schools are trying to build a system, a support, like a support system that would create, would remove some of the silos that exist for mental health supports and other supports for students. And the last one on this page is special education. $2.4 billion of additional funding for special education, or about $1,340 per student. What this means, so while this money will go to students with in special education, what it does is it replaces what we call in general fund terms as encroachment, and that is when you have a high percentage of students with special needs, and you have, say, 16% of your kids on IEPs, the monies that the state and federal government give us for special education aren't adequate, and they encroach on the general fund. In other words, they take money from the pot of money for all kids. These 2.4 billion will backfill for that, and what it will do is free up lots of money in the general fund to be going back into the general education program. So this is a really good thing, and I think a very smart move by the governor. And there's a possibility of more money coming. So if you've read any of the recent articles, EdSource has a good one that came out recently. There's a little bit of consternation from administrators about the governor withholding $3.9 billion from the education budget. He did this to balance some other areas of the budget, but rightfully, that money is ours. It's according to Prop 98. It goes to schools, and so we anticipate that that money will still be will not be withheld by the time June comes around and the final budget is finished. So what happens from the process is the May revision is sent to legislature. Now the legislature will decide whether or not they want to change anything. Then they will vote on a bill, and then they'll give it back to the governor to sign. We think that the legislature will override this $3.9 billion withholding because, and I think the governor will sign it because he won't be governor next year, and he's got no skin in the game in that way. So if the legislature is pretty convincing, and it's a super majority Democrat legislature in California, then we think another 3.9 billion could be coming into schools. And how it gets distributed will be up to the legislature. It could all go into LCAP, it could go into discretionary, we don't know. But even if they choose not to give it to us and they call the suspension, it means we'll gain interest on it and we'll get it in a future year. This has happened before too. So here's the thing that I want you to do is find some money in your district. There are 3 programs that are ending as of June 30th. And so the 2 that we have been putting a lot of emphasis on is the A through G grant and the Educator Effectiveness Block Grant. Both of these were the A through G grant was a $700 million program, and the Educator Effectiveness Grant was around a $6 billion program. So there's a chance that there's still money left in your accounts, in your districts. And if they don't spend it by June 30th of 2026, they have to give it back to the state. So this is something to ask your business department about. We did a blog a while back called Navigating Upcoming Deadlines, and there's a link to that. But the resource codes are the key. You can go into your business department and ask them if there's any monies remaining, and can we use it for contracts? If they pay for the contracts before June 30th, then you can actually contract things that will take place next year. So it's just something that you want to be aware of. And this one is not well known, but the Art, Music, and Instructional Material Block Grant has a key word in it also. It also is discretionary. And part of those funds can be used to improve school climate. And so a lot of schools have been using their AMIM monies to support professional development in MTSS and PBIS. But same thing, they've got 2 to 4 weeks to get this tightened up before that money is going to be too late to spend. So that would be something to advocate for at your local school district. Okay, so other funds. Oops, I went too far. I went way too far. Hang on a second.
No worries. While Paul finds his place, I'm rapidly, as fast as I can, Paul, trying to keep up putting all the documents and links that you have in the chat.
Oh, I've been noticing that. So thank you for doing that. That gives people immediate access. Okay, so here's another link. We do a California funding for school counselors. I usually do one at the end of the year when the budget comes out, and then I'll update it in January when the proposal comes out for the following year. So you can look at that and see, but basically I'm going to review them now. I would say the biggest place to advocate for your school counseling program is in the LCAP or what we know as the LCFF. These funds come to you automatically based upon a formula. And so if you're in a school district that has a high percentage of English learners, students on free and reduced lunch, or homeless and foster youth, you get a higher percentage of money. And with that higher percentage of funds from the state comes a responsibility to use those funds to improve student outcomes. And not only do they have to improve student outcomes, you have to show whether they worked or not. So this is very important for, especially for counseling. We want to make sure if the funds have been invested in your LCAP through the LCAP into your counseling program, you do have to show results like improved graduation rates or decreased suspension rates, etc. You have to have some way of showing that these funds made a difference in student outcomes. But this is you get input into this. This is locally owned. It's the people who make the decision are your district office staff, your superintendent, and your school board. And so there ought to be public hearing sessions on what's going into the plan. And if you want to advocate for your program, that's when you need to speak up and do participate in those. If you don't, then you don't know what goes in your LCAP. And I think that's the biggest pot of money in your whole district. Now, this is an old grant that came out a few years ago, and it's good until June 28. So you have 2 years to use these monies. And notice that it was $6.8 billion, and California authorized another 753 in the governor's proposal back in January. So there's been more money infused into this block grant, and it can be used basically any way you want. It's a backfill for the ESSERS money when federal government gave us COVID money. This can be used basically for learning recovery, which is basically anything that has to do with student learning. And so the only thing is you have to do a needs assessment and you have to put it in your LCAP, but that is not hard to do. But pay attention to those funds. That's the resource code 7435. College and career grants are here. We also have a guide on college and career funding for school counseling leaders in California. And each of these grants is detailed in that guide. If you want to know more about them, how the monies can be used to support school counseling, I won't go into each one of them because I think people who are going to pay attention to this are your high school counselors only. But it is something that you get to lean into. Now, these grants come through CDE, and if you notice that in the future there's less and less of these coming out of CDE, and instead there's just discretionary dollars, and the governor's saying use it for dual enrollment and use it for CTE, but it's no longer prescripted. There's also funds that go to the community college. Remember, they're part of that K-12 Prop 98. And these programs all have to be applied for through the chancellor's office. So that's the California Community College Chancellor's Office. And each of these are hot links to those programs. This is something that takes some coordination. The K-12 one was due by April 30th, but you have next year, it'll come around again. These are all part of the California's master plan on college and career readiness. So the community colleges get these funds, but the money's meant for articulation and programs at the high school. So they're distributing it, but it's a partnership grant. After school program. This is one that gets a lot of money, and schools struggle on how to do it, how to spend it. But one of the things that ELOP, Extended Learning Opportunities Program, can be used for is student support. And that is you can hire coaches, or tutors or school counselors after school to work with students. This is a good place if you have retired school counselors who just want to work a few hours a day. They can work in the after school program, running groups, running sessions, teaching lessons. There's a lot of funding here. And then the other thing is because attendance is such an important factor in revenue generation, you can use ELOP to do attendance recovery. What we used to know as Saturday school is now you can generate revenue by just coming to after school program if it's being taught by a certificated employee and it's being run through your district. So if you're outsourcing your after school program, this isn't available to you. But if it's in-house, you can use this to generate additional revenue. And then there's this the CYBHI. Many of you have heard about this, what we call fee schedule or Child, Youth, and Behavioral Health Initiative. This began in 2019, and it's a multi-billion-dollar initiative across the state of California. And over $1 billion has been sent into setting up the infrastructure in California. It's being promoted or coordinated through county offices, but it is something to pay attention to because we think it has potential to really help your students. So we wrote a blog that you can access on our website called School Counselors as Leaders of CYBHI, because I think there's a moral imperative here to make sure that every student has access to seamless mental health support. And that all comes through this CYBHI, and there is a lot of coordination that needs to occur, but it's also can generate revenue for your program. Now, here's where it kind of all comes together. The California School Partnership Program, the Community School Partnership Program, is the vehicle that's going to bring all these things together. So it is the hub which braids your after-school program, your MTSS framework, and your CYBHI initiatives, which is the reimbursement funding, into an operational whole child educational infrastructure. So it provides so if you just wrap your head around that a lot. If you're in a school and you're a school counselor, you hear about these programs, but if you can step back and see the big picture, what this is trying to do is erase the silos that have existed between mental health access and our students in education. So often it's been complicated and convoluted and not functional for students who really need the additional help. And that's what community school can help bridge. It basically brings your school as the mental health and actually health framework for your community. Parents trust your schools. They have access to your schools. Your kids have access to your schools, and that makes access to mental health and other healthcare professionals available to students. So I see the good in this, and I want you to lean in to see how you can be involved in coordinating some of these things with your district. Because the 4 pillars of the community school movement are integrated supports. We all like that. I just talked about that. Family and community engagement, because schools are safe places for students and families. Collaborative leadership practices, getting folks to all work in the same sandbox, so to say, so work together to make sure that we can provide these social emotional supports, restorative practices, and other things that can transform our school culture by working together and erasing some of these silos. I see huge potential for this coming in the years ahead. It will take years. I'm not going to be facetious there. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's a 5-year plan. And I think if you can lean in, the students in your community will benefit, because your after school program, if they all work together, they actually create a seamless support system for students that I think every counselor would love to see students to have access to. So that is really the end of our session. Hopefully we've covered our objectives. And as we begin to close, I want you to take a moment and take this either with your phone or with, but this is an access for you. If you would like to just sit talk with us for 15 minutes, we can set up a quick 15-minute Zoom call to go over a specific funding stream. If we don't have the answers, we can research them and get back to you. But we want to be, we know that funding drives so many services within a school, and we want you to know how to access those funds so that you can grow your program, grow your services, and make sure students have the supports they need to be successful in this life and in their adult life.
And for school counselors that are on the call, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to say, can you explain this to me a little bit more? This is not taught in our professional program. It's not taught in the teacher professional program. And so this is just kind of something we learn as we are on the journey of our career. So don't be afraid to go to your district directors, your COSAs, your CTE directors, your principals, and say, hey, I want to learn more about this. Right. And I feel like that is what helped me in my journey as I started learning how, as I grew in my positions, I could continue to advocate for my school counselors to ensure they had what they needed to support students in our schools.
Yeah, and with that, we have a couple minutes in case anyone has specific questions. But otherwise, happy Friday of a long weekend as your all years are wrapping up. And again, huge thank you to Paul for putting all of this information together, for Amanda for supporting and sharing her expertise as well. And we wish you the best as the year ends and as you continue to develop and grow your counseling program.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and
And if anyone does have questions, feel free to either unmute or feel free to pop a question in the chat. And yes, definitely packed. We wanted to make sure you had all of the information, all the links. Sometimes less is more, but in this case, we wanted to make sure that you had everything so that you can dig in as applies in your role and such. Yes, sometimes more is more.
all right. Well, that was fun. I appreciate those of you who could attend, and hopefully you had some new knowledge that you can take back and grow your programs at your different schools.